giant bombers, low altitude, a fully prepared enemy, a vital target, and an almost inevitable end. Was this attack a catastrophic mistake? August 1st, 1943, early morning. Hundreds of B-24 Liberator bombers sit lined up in the scorching Libyan desert, engines warming. Pilots climb into their cockpits. Crews carry out final checks. Everyone involved understands one thing: this mission is different. The target is Ploiești in Romania, the oil heart of Nazi Germany. A target that could change the course of the war. If these refineries were destroyed, the German war machine would be starved of fuel. Tanks would grind to a halt. Aircraft would stay on the ground. The war would end. At least that was the theory. But there was a problem. In fact, there were many problems. The first was distance. From Libya to Romania, it was thousands of kilometers. A long, exhausting, and dangerous flight. The second was defense. Ploiești was one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe. German anti-aircraft batteries, fighter squadrons, everything was ready. The third problem was the plan itself. This mission would be flown at low altitude, very low. Bombers would pass between buildings, smokestacks, power lines. Why? Because American commanders believed low altitude would provide surprise. Flying low meant avoiding radar, delivering bombs with greater accuracy, and hitting the target more effectively. At least, that was how it looked on paper. In reality, low altitude was not protection. It was exposure. The lower you flew, the less time you had to react. There was no room to maneuver, no space to escape. One mistake meant instant disaster. And over Ploiești, there was no margin for error. Did the pilots know this? Yes. Did they go anyway? Yes. Why? Because it was an order. And in war, orders are rarely questioned. Though perhaps in this case, they should have been. You'll see shortly that Operation Tidal Wave is not a story of triumph or heroism. It is the story of brave men sacrificed to a flawed doctrine. A reminder that in war, your own strategy can sometimes be your greatest enemy. So, was this mission truly necessary, or was it the price of a fundamentally broken plan? And after this operation, did pilots still believe in the doctrine they were asked to follow? You about to find out. In the summer of 1943, the U.S. Army Air Forces were putting their strategic bombing doctrine to the test. The theory was straightforward: cripple the enemy's war production and you win the war. Destroy factories, refineries, railways, starve the enemy of fuel, ammunition, and vehicles. Ploiești was the perfect test case for this idea. The oil refineries in Romania supplied roughly 30% of Nazi Germany's total fuel needs. If these facilities were destroyed, German tanks would grind to a halt, the Luftwaffe would be grounded, and operations on the Eastern Front would be paralyzed. On paper, the logic was flawless. But wars are not fought on paper. The first problem was distance. Ploiești lay far beyond the range of bases in England, so the operation was launched from Libya in North Africa. Even then, the distance was extreme. The B-24 Liberator had long range, yes, but flying such a vast distance out and back pushed fuel limits to the edge. Any delay, any mistake, meant running out of fuel. The second problem was the aircraft itself. The B-24 was excellent in terms of range and bomb load, but it was not designed for low-altitude operations. It was large, heavy, and sluggish. At high altitude, flying in tight formation, it was effective. At low altitude, flying alone, it was vulnerable. The third problem was doctrinal. American commanders believed low altitude offered advantages: avoiding radar, achieving surprise, and delivering bombs with greater accuracy. All of this made sense in theory. In practice, low altitude created entirely new dangers. Flying low made aircraft easier targets for anti-aircraft guns. The shorter distance meant gunners could aim more accurately. Buildings, smokestacks, power lines, trees. Every obstacle became a threat. One wrong move, one delayed reaction meant a crash. And most importantly, there was no escape. At low altitude, if you were hit, you had no height to trade for time. Without altitude, there was no margin. There was nothing to do but fall. Still, the plan moved forward. 177 B-24s. 5 bomber groups. Each group assigned a different refinery. Radio silence would preserve surprise. Low altitude would be maintained. The targets would be found and destroyed. On the morning of August 1st, the bombers took off. From Libya, they flew across the Mediterranean, over Greece, then Bulgaria, and into Romania. Hours passed in the air. Fatigue set in. Fuel gauges crept downward, but the target was approaching. Then the first failure occurred. Navigation errors. Clouds, wind, exhaustion. Some aircraft drifted off course. Entire groups turned the wrong way. Formations broke apart. With radio silence enforced, coordination was impossible. Surprise was lost. German radar picked up the incoming force. Anti-aircraft batteries were alerted. Fighter aircraft scrambled. Now, put yourself in that cockpit. You've been flying for hours. You're exhausted. The plan is unraveling. The formation is gone. You're flying low, alone, deep inside enemy airspace. Turning back isn't an option. The fuel won't last. The only choice left is to continue, and that is exactly what they did. As the bombers reached the outskirts of Ploiești, the sky turned into chaos. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from every direction. German fighters attacked. The aircraft were still flying at treetop level. Some slipped between buildings. Some skimmed over smokestacks. Some clipped power lines. Some never made it through. Losses began immediately. One B-24 was hit, caught fire, and crashed. Then another. Smoke filled the sky. Still, the bombing went on. The bombers reached the refineries and released their payloads. Explosions tore through the facilities. Fires erupted. Oil tanks detonated. Thick black smoke rose high into the air. But the cost was enormous. What happened over Ploiești that morning was not a carefully executed bombardment. It was a fight for survival. The B-24s were flying at extremely low altitude, so low that some aircraft were passing below rooftop level. Pilots could see chimneys, power lines, and thick smoke directly ahead and tried desperately to avoid them. But at that speed, avoidance was nearly impossible. One pilot shouted over the radio, "There's a chimney right in front of me. I can't avoid it." Seconds later, the aircraft struck the chimney. An engine tore away, the bomber slammed into the ground and exploded. Anti-aircraft batteries fired without pause. Fire came from every direction. Some aircraft were hit, engulfed in flames, and began to fall. Others had their fuel tanks ignite and disintegrated in midair. Yet some pilots still reached their targets. They flew over the refineries and released their bombs. Oil storage tanks, pipelines, and buildings were struck. Explosions triggered chain reactions. Fires spread rapidly. Thick smoke swallowed the sky. But even this success carried a deadly cost. Bombs dropped at such low altitude sometimes damaged the attacking aircraft themselves. The explosions were so close that shockwaves tore into nearby planes. One pilot later said, "When I released my bombs, the blast nearly knocked me out of the sky. We were flying so low that our own weapons were hitting us." Put yourself in that cockpit. Buildings ahead, fires to the side, explosions behind you. The aircraft is shaking. One engine is burning. Fuel is dangerously low. And you know that if you go down now, no one is coming to save you. Would you have kept going? They did, because there was no other choice. As the surviving bombers pulled away from Ploiești, nearly half the force was gone. 53 B-24s had been destroyed. Hundreds of crew members were killed or captured. Most of the returning aircraft were badly damaged. Some never made it back to Libya, ditching in the sea or landing in the desert. Was the mission completed? Yes. Was the target hit? Yes. But was this truly a success? After Operation Tidal Wave, American commanders evaluated the results. The refineries at Ploiești had been damaged. Oil production was temporarily disrupted. But within weeks, the Germans repaired the facilities. Production resumed. 53 B-24s were lost. Hundreds of crew members were killed or captured. Many pilots were awarded the Medal of Honor. Their courage was unquestionable, but the outcome? So was the price paid worth the effect achieved? There's no easy answer, because in war, success and failure can exist within the same mission. Ploiești was hit, yes, but production was not stopped. The Germans repaired the damage quickly. The war did not end because of this operation. At best, it was slowed for a few weeks, but it was not halted. At the same time, Operation Tidal Wave delivered hard lessons. It exposed the dangers of low-altitude bombing. It showed how catastrophic navigation errors could be. It proved that once a formation broke apart, each aircraft was left alone, and its chances of survival dropped sharply. This mission taught the U.S. Army Air Forces a critical truth. Courage alone is not enough. Without the right strategy, the right tools, and proper planning, courage leads only to losses. Perhaps the most important lesson of Operation Tidal Wave is this. In war, the greatest losses often come from mistakes that were believed to be correct. A plan may be bold, but boldness does not make a flawed plan right. So, was this mission truly necessary, or was it simply the cost of a doctrinal error? You decide. But remember this, the men who died in the sky that day were brave. The question is whether the decisions that sent them there were. In the next video, we'll examine other controversial bombing missions, such as Schweinfurt to Regensburg. Because Operation Tidal Wave was not an exception, similar mistakes were repeated throughout the war, and each time brave people paid the price.